When you're scrolling through subwoofer options, the cheap ones look tempting, just a few $100s and a glossy box promising deep bass. Most of the time those budget units end up sounding like a muffled thump, and you're left reaching for the remote to crank the volume only to hear distortion. That regret is why I spent a few evenings actually wiring the SVS SB3000 into my home theater and testing it with a mix of movies, music, and games before hitting record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The first thing I noticed is that the SB3000 isn't trying to be a budget sub, it's positioned as a high-performance model that still fits in a modest cabinet. The 13-inch driver is the first of its size from SVS, and it's built for high-excursion movement. In practice, that means you get that punchy, controlled low end you expect from a much larger box without having to carve a hole in the wall. When I played the opening rumble of Dunkirk, the bass felt like a physical vibration in the floorboards, yet it didn't spill over into the mid-range and muddy the dialogue. What really sets this sub apart is the DSP chip inside. SVS uses a 50 MHz high-resolution analog devices processor, and they pair it with a dedicated mobile app that lets you fine-tune volume, phase, and crossover points from your phone. I was skeptical at first. Software can be a gimmick, but after a quick calibration using the app's auto-room correction, the SB3000 settled into the room's acoustics without me having to guess the right settings. I could then dial in a tighter low end for a rhythm-heavy track like Daft Punk, and later shift to a looser, booming setting for an action film, all without leaving my couch. If you're a movie enthusiast who wants that theater-style impact, the SB3000 delivers. The 800W RMS, with over 500W peak power, isn't just a number on a spec sheet, it translates to real headroom when you're watching something like Mad Max, Fury Road. I pushed the sub to full blast during a car chase scene and still heard clean, articulate bass instead of the growl you get from weaker units. For gamers, especially those who play titles with a lot of environmental rumble like Red Dead Redemption 2, the sub adds an immersive layer that makes you feel the horse's hooves on a dusty trail. However, there are trade-offs that matter. The SB3000's compact footprint is a selling point, but it also means the enclosure is relatively sealed, which can make it a bit slower to fill the room with the deepest frequencies compared to a larger ported box. In a massive open-plan living room, you'll still notice the bass rolling off around the 30 Hz mark, so if you need sub-bass that can shake a big space, you might need a second sub or a larger model. Also, the unit runs hot under continuous high-power demand, so it's best to give it a few minutes of cooldown after marathon gaming sessions. Otherwise, you'll see the fan ramp up and add a faint hiss that some listeners find distracting. Who should consider buying the SB3000? First, anyone who already has a decent AV receiver or a dedicated amp and is looking to upgrade the low end without committing to a massive subwoofer cabinet. It fits nicely under a couch or against a wall, making it ideal for apartments or smaller home theaters. Second, audiophiles who care about precision will appreciate the ability to tweak the DSP settings rather than being stuck with a fixed crossover. Finally, people who want a sub that can handle both music and movies without needing separate presets will find the app's flexibility a real time saver. Who might skip it? If you live in a huge open floor plan and expect the bass to shake the entire space, you'll probably need something larger or add a second sub. Likewise, if you're on a very tight budget and are okay with a basic boom rather than controlled, musical low end, there are cheaper options that will still get the job done, though you'll likely pay for that cheapness later in the form of distortion or limited adjustability. And if you're not comfortable fiddling with DSP parameters, even though the app is intuitive, you might prefer a plug-and-play sub that's set at the factory. Another practical point is connectivity. The SB3000 uses a standard line-level input, so you can hook it up to any receiver with a sub out. I tried both the high-level speaker-level inputs on my older AVR and the dedicated sub out on a newer one. The performance was consistent, which tells me the internal amp is handling the signal cleanly. The power cord is thick and feels robust, but the unit does require a dedicated outlet, so if you're planning a clean, hidden setup, you'll need to factor in an extra power point or a short extension cord. From a value perspective, the headline specs 13-inch driver, 800W RMS, high-resolution DSP are impressive, but the real value comes from how those specs translate into everyday use. You get deep, tight bass that doesn't overwhelm the rest.